So verse number 11 and 12 of Surah An-Nur, which talks about the story of the if. So let us continue from there. The verse number 11 actually says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ جَاءُوا بِالْإِفْكِ عُصْبَةٌ مِّنْكُمْ. So the verse actually begins by talking about the if, the instant here, that a group of people, they came with its slander. So let us continue from there. Now we mentioned that the story, a quick review of the story, then we'll go into the new content for today. That we mentioned that after the battle of Musayri, that the Prophet ﷺ was returning, or Bani Mustalaq was returning from his battle, and on his return, many things happened. One of the things that happened was the feud or the dispute between an Ansari and the Muhajir, in which Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, the chief hypocrite, the Munafiq, he saw this as an opportunity in which to instigate and incite further hatred between the Ansar and the Muhajirun, to revive the tribal feuds. And that was one of the ways in which he was able to maintain animosity and hatred amongst the people there, the companions and others. And he made a slander in that when they were returning back to Medina, he said that when we get back to Medina, the noble one will be put back in his position, and the ignorant one, the ignorant one will be removed. And we mentioned a story last week that a young boy heard him say that, and he rushed to the Prophet ﷺ, and he informed the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet summoned Abdullah ibn Ubay. He summoned him and asked him about the question, and he refused, and I didn't say this. And then the Prophet ﷺ kind of dismissed the situation. The boy was disheartened because of what he heard, and nothing, action had been taken. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Munafiqun, in verse number 7 and 8, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he revealed that هم الذي يقولون لا تنفقوا على من عند رسول الله حتى ينفضوا ولله خزائن السماوات والأرض ولكن المنافقين لا يفقهون يقولون لئن رجعنا إلى المدينة. So the Munafiqs, they said that if we return back to Medina, لا يخرجن العز منها الأذل, that the one with Izzah will be put back in his place, and the Adhal, the one that is low, will be removed. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he confirmed that the story of the boy was right, and that the Abdullah had said his words. And then Allah says, وَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَلَكِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here, the 7th ayah of Surah Munafiqun, that al-izzah, honor and dignity, it belongs with Allah, and it belongs with His Messenger, and it belongs with the believers. So Surah Al-Mu'minun, verse number 7, that if one wants honor, one wants prestige, or one wants to be known for virtue, then they have to turn to Allah and turn to His Messenger. And the important part in the ayah, Allah also says وَلِلْ مُؤْمِنِينَ, that is with the believers. The opposite of al-mu'minin is al-kuffar. That if you seek honor and prestige from the disbelievers, you will never find it, or from the hypocrites, you will never find it. They will only be found amongst the believers, and at that time the believers were none other than the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. And Allah says, وَلَكِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, but the hypocrites, they do not perceive or understand. So on this verse, this is the backdrop to the story of the if, that Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, he is the one who was caught out lying. He was the one who was caught out standing in front of the Prophet ﷺ, and he was said, and he vowed that he didn't say what he said, and Allah revealed that he was the liar, and the young boy was the one who spoke the truth. So he was publicly humiliated. And Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, as we mentioned previously, that he was his title, his nickname is actually the uncrowned king of Medina. That was his name. Why? Because the Aus and the Khazraj, they were at war with each other for many, many years. Ancestral war, and they were killing each other. And the new generation of Aus and Khazraj, they didn't even know why they were killing each other, but they were killing each other, and they wanted it to come to an end. So they were looking for some peace, some kind of stability. And before the pledges of Aqaba al-Ula wa Thaniya, before these agreements were made, the Aus and the Khazraj, they had agreed that they are going to assign somebody who is going to lead the whole of Medina. And at that time, what people understood in terms of authority and leadership was kingdoms. That's how the world governed. So they had planned to put Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul as the king or the governor of Medina. That was the plan, and everything was put in place. They say so much so that even his throne was being prepared and being made. That's how close he was to becoming the king. But when the Prophet ﷺ arrived, he did not end up becoming the king by public support, that the Prophet ﷺ became the leader, not by any dictatorship or not by authority, by the will of the people. They wanted the Prophet ﷺ to lead them. The Prophet ﷺ, he became the leader of Al-Medina, and Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul, he didn't attain any power. But having said that, he was still a very influential person in Medina, and he had a huge following. So the Prophet ﷺ knew that, so he dealt with him very carefully. Because these kind of people, whatever you do with them, it will impact the society and it will impact the people. So the Prophet dealt with him very carefully, being the chief hypocrite. But here at this moment, we know that Abdullah Bey, his reputation was harmed and he was hurt. And he wanted to strike back at the Prophet ﷺ in any way possible. And then we come to the other story. So we actually come to the story of the Ifk, in which I'm just summarizing from last week, so we're all on the same page. That as they were traveling back from the battle with Bani Mustalaq and they were coming back to Medina, numerous places they would stop and they would take a rest. Going across the desert's not an easy thing to do, so they would take common rest. And the most obvious reasons why people stop off at the motorway is to go use the bathrooms, to freshen up, and then continue on with the journey. So likewise, they would stop and they would use the bathroom. And the story of the Ifk is also important to note that it took place shortly after the rules of the hijab. So when the rules of the hijab came down, prior to that, the women, they would wear normal clothing, what was common amongst the Arab culture, they would wear those clothing. But then after the ahkam of the hijab came, now the women started to do full barda, the full hijab and the full garments. But we also know from hadith that the hijab of the Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, the hijab or the abaya of the mothers of the believers, was more than other women. Okay, so to the point where they would cover their faces, whereas other women, they were not obligated to. There is a ikhtilaf on the issue of the niqab, but we won't go into that. But generally speaking, there was no obligation for women to cover their faces, but to cover everything, other parts of the body. But the women of the believers, it was the mothers of the believers, it was obligated upon them to do extra parda, because they were the wives of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that also shows another very important point, is that when we talk about the hijab, and especially when we talk about the niqab, we should also talk about it in respect. Okay, because some people, non-Muslim or Muslim, they may mock it or they may make fun of these things, but it's not something that we should do, because it's something that the mothers of the believers were wearing. So we respect it. Now, whether you wear it or not is a different story, but you respect it because the mothers of the believers were wearing it. So that's something very, very important. So after the ayat of ahkam, we find that as the Prophet ﷺ, he took Aisha with him to the battle of Bani Mustalaq, and she was young at this time. And if you add up all the dates and everything, you'll work out that she was roughly about 14, 15, 16, roughly that kind of age when she went. So she was fairly small. And they would carry the women of that time in what's known as a hawdaj, a chamber or a box that the woman would go inside. I think last week somebody mentioned the Urdu or the Punjabi equivalent. I forgot, what was it? Doli. Yeah, Doli, there you go. So, so we kept all segments of the community happy, right? So there was a Doli or a Khawdaj or whatever word you want to use, but a box in which she would sit inside, a little room, and then that would be carried on the camels and people would lift it up and they would travel on that. So when they stopped off on one occasion to take a rest, Aisha, the mother of the believers, she came down from the Khawdaj. They bring it down, the people, and they brought it down, and they saw the people carrying, they saw her leave the Khawdaj, and the tawadu, the humility of these people, they wouldn't look at the mothers of the believers. They saw she's there, they would look away, and she went to relieve herself. And at that time, what was common was that when people would go to the bathroom for a number one or a number two, they would go as far away as they can. And they would go as far away as they can and somewhere where nobody can see them. So she went and she used the bathroom, and on her way back, when she came back and she was about to climb back up into the Hawdaj, she noticed that her chain was missing. She had a necklace and her chain was missing. She noticed that. So then she turned back and she went looking for it, and she went back, followed her footsteps to where she had been. Now, the people around at that time, what did they see? They saw her come back, and they saw her go towards the Hawdaj. So they're not the type of people to stare and look at her going up. So they saw her go up and they assumed she was inside. But she went back to look for the necklace. Now, when the Prophet ﷺ gave the order for the march to continue to go into Medina, they left and they did not take Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha with them, and she was left behind. And as mentioned as well, that as they left, funny enough, she actually found her necklace. It was there where she had come off So it was when the camel got up and moved, she actually found her necklace at that point. So she was light, and she was, many say 14 or 15, along that age. Now what happens next is she realizes that they have gone and she's in the middle of the desert. What does she do? And we mentioned as well, who narrates to us this story? Herself. And where is the story found, in which book? Sahih Bukhari. There's nothing more stronger than this. So there is, in terms of authenticity, you can't get any stronger than that. That it's found in Sahih Bukhari, and on top of that, she tells the story herself. So it's not like somebody else is saying it. If somebody else says it, you can say, oh, it's not true, it's true, and so on and so forth. But she says it herself. So she is the narrator of the hadith. So in that, she makes mention that when the caravan had gone by, and she realized nobody is there, she doesn't panic, she doesn't do anything. She finds a place or a spot where she sits down and she awaits for some help. Yeah? Which also shows us the hikmah and the wisdom in the mother of the believers, that she had trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that she knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will aid and assist her, and she took refuge and she sat and she waited there, such that she mentions that she waited and sleep overtook her, that she fell asleep. Now, as the caravan was passing by, the whole caravan had passed by, but there was an individual by the name of Sufyan ibn Mu'attal. Sufyan ibn Mu'attal was an early Muslim, from one of the early Muslims, but we don't have much about him. He's not very famous, but apart from this story, he was known for this story. Sufyan ibn Mu'attal, he was coming and he was lagging behind. Now, many people look at the reasons to why he was lagging behind. Allahu Alam, the exact reason to why he was lagging behind. But one thing is for sure, that on any expedition, for the scouts here or those who go moving, there's always somebody who's at the front of the line, and there's always somebody at the back of the line. This is always confirmed. So you know that this is the beginning and this is the end, and we haven't lost anyone in the way. So he was the last one. But he was fairly behind, and there was many people made reasons to why he ended up becoming so far behind. But nevertheless, he was on his camel, and Sufyan ibn Mu'attal, as he was coming forward, he realized that he saw somebody lying there. Now you can imagine that if you're going across the desert and you see a woman or somebody lying under a tree, now that's going to cause alarm, going to cause panic. So he drew closer, and when he drew closer, he realized and he recognized that this was none other than who? The wife of the Prophet ﷺ. So upon seeing that, he himself, out of shock, he shouted out, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. And upon that shock, Aisha, she realized, and she woke up as well. And through the hadith, we find that there was no conversation that took place. There was no words that were exchanged. It was simply that. You can imagine that the man is going through the desert and he finds a woman lying there. And even though finding somebody in the desert is strange enough as it is, but then to think that you're going to find the wife of the Prophet there was a bigger shock. So Sufyan ibn Mu'attal, as he comes, he finds the wife of the Prophet ﷺ there, Aisha, lying there, and he says, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, in which she realizes somebody has arrived. And again, one may say, or ask the question, how did you recognize that that was the mother of the believers? Why? Because this was just after the ayat of the parda. Before that, there was no parda in that sense. So they did recognize each other. He recognized that it was her, and he said, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. As we said, that the verses of the hijab, they were revealed in the 4th year of the hijrah, so 4 years after hijrah, and this event that took place was at the beginning of the 5th year of the hijrah, so roughly is a couple of months after the verses of hijab and the ifk. So this is important to note, and that's one of the reasons how he was able to recognize. Now so upon saying La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, she wakens to find him. And Sufyan ibn Mu'attal, he has his camel there. He makes his camel kneel down, and he turns his back. He turns to the front of the camel and he turns his back. There is no conversation that Aisha narrates that took place between them, upon which the reason to why he brings his camel down is what's the reason for that? So she can climb the camel, right? And there is no hawdaj now, so she's going to be exposed on top of the camel. So Sufyan ibn Mu'attal, he brings the camel down, she ascends, and he doesn't look at her while she's going up, and he gets on top of the camel, and they make their way towards Medina. Okay, so this is the story that is coming to us from Aisha. The camel comes down and he takes her into Medina. Now, now as Sufyan ibn Mu'attal is holding the camel, he's walking, and the mother of the believers is on top. They're trying to catch up with the caravan. As they enter into the city, you can imagine that there's a strange man, the wife of the Prophet, on top of the camel. They enter into the city and they don't think anything of it, nor does anybody else think anything of it, because one thing that is we have to recognize the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, out of all of the people, they were the best of people. And when it comes to their thoughts were clean and good thoughts. So nobody thought anything of it, except for who? The hypocrites, the munafiqun. The hypocrites, any opportunity they can find, they will criticize Islam, they will criticize the Prophet ﷺ, they'll find any way of criticizing. And the leader of this campaign was who? Who started these rumors? Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul. So he started off this campaign and he started to say, look at that, a strange man and a strange woman coming in alone by themselves. Where were they? What were they doing? So this is the beginning of the slander that they said about Aisha radiallahu anha. So they saw this lone woman entering and the rumors started to spread. And as we said, Sufyan ibn Mu'attal wasn't very well known. He wasn't a major Sahih. He was an early Muslim for sure, but he wasn't well known. There's not much about him that we know about. So that's the background of Sufyan. What's interesting as well with the story is that, subhanAllah, you know, the mind of a human being, if a person's mind is clean, you'll find that the conversations and the things they say will be clean. If a person's mind is dirty, then you'll find that the conversations and words will be dirty. And likewise, when people saw these guys come in, no one said anything because their hearts were pure and clean. They wouldn't think like that. But somebody whose mind is filth, then that's what they would come out with. I think I mentioned once a story, Allahu Alam if it's true, but in the story they said that there was a man. There was two men who went out and they were coming back late. One man went out and he was partying and clubbing all night, drinking and having a good time. And there was another man that went out to pray Fajr. So he went out to the masjid to pray Fajr. Now both of them, they were on their way back at the same time going home. Now the one who had come back from the club, he looked at the Muslim and he looked at him and said, this guy's probably been clubbing all night. Yeah, just like me, he's been clubbing and partying, and not just me. The guy who has prayed Fajr and is walking his way home, he looks and he goes, MashaAllah, guys prayed Fajr just like me. We're both going home now after Fajr. So the point being is that if the mind is clean, you will think good of people. If the mind is filth, you will think bad of other people. It's all about the eyes. So in this case, we find Abdullah ibn Ubay, when he saw that, he found it as an opportunity to spread rumors, and that is exactly what happened. And he started to spread the evil words. Coincidentally, at the same time, we find that Aisha radiallahu anha, when she returned back, she actually was hit with a fever. She was sick. And she was hit with a fever, and she was temperature, high fever for a period of about a month, in which she was lying down and she didn't have much maneuver. She wasn't interacting with much people. She wasn't going out because she wasn't well. And in that month, the Prophet ﷺ would come and visit her. And as the rumors were spreading, it was firstly on the outskirts, just among the hypocrites. Then the rumors started to grow, and finally it reached some of the big companions. And then finally, once it reached the big companions, it wasn't long before it reached the Abu Bakr and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So it reached them. Now it was a state of confusion. People were asking, where are these rumors coming from? What is happening? And eventually we find that the Prophet ﷺ, when it reached him, the Prophet ﷺ, he defended his wife. He defended the honor of his wife. Yet, being a man, there was confusion, right? So the Prophet ﷺ, when it comes to his mu'amala, his interaction with his wife, and don't forget Aisha was his beloved out of all of his wives, that even Aisha, she says that in that month when the Prophet ﷺ would come visit me, he would come and ask me, how are you? And I would respond back and say, I'm fine. And then the Prophet ﷺ would leave. And she said, I noticed a change in his behavior. He never said anything to me. He never did anything, but I noticed, I'm his wife. I noticed there was something different with the Prophet ﷺ. Yet because she was ill, she had no idea about the rumors that were taking place. And this also shows us something beautiful about the nobility of the Prophet ﷺ, that a man, if he was to hear such rumors in his community about his wife, most likely most people, they would immediately react. Yeah, they would confront their wife, they would cause a problem, something would happen. And the Prophet ﷺ knew that his wife was unwell. He also had confidence and trust in his wife, yet he did not confront her while she was ill. And that was for a whole period of a month. The Prophet ﷺ, he showed sabr and patience without saying anything for a period of a month while she was sick and while she was unwell. So she had minimal interaction with them. Now, after the month expires, Aisha, she becomes better. And when she's better, now she starts to move around more and she's talking to people, yet she is still unaware of the story of what is happening. So she interacts with another Sahabiya by the name of Mistah. Okay, Mistah. And Mistah, the women at that time, what they would do is they would gather together, and when they wanted to go to the bathroom, when they want to relieve themselves, they would go out into the open field. Okay, so now you've got bathrooms, but in that time, the women, they would go out and they wouldn't go close, they would go as far as they can, because again, they're going to the bathroom. There was a trend actually at that time, that bathrooms, some of them, they started to bring them a bit closer to the places of residence, but people didn't like that because they were still out in the open, so they would still prefer to go far out and wide. So we find that the Aisha radiallahu ta'ala, she narrates to us the story that she went with Mistah, and they went to use the bathroom. And what's actually very interesting is that they would go to they would go to relieve themselves. The women would go collectively to fulfill their needs. They would gather and they would go. And Aisha, she says that once every few days that we would go, once every 2-3 days we would go and go as far as we can, and we would relieve ourselves. Now, in that, just in and of itself, I was very interested to note that when people were going to use the bathroom, they would go every once in 2 days or maybe 3 days. So what does that show you? They eat very little. I don't want to say how many times you go to the bathroom in a day, but it shows us that these people, they used to eat very little. If you eat little, you're going to go less often to the bathroom. So it shows that they actually lived off very little food. You know, they used to have very little food. And we find even in other hadith that Aisha radiallahu anha, Aisha says that many a times would go, she said 2 months went by in our house and no fire was lit in our house. This is the Prophet ﷺ, right? Which means that there was no salan, there was no roast, there was no tandoori, there was nothing. They were living off what? Dry food. For 2 months, she said, for 2 months, sometimes the fire wasn't lit in our house. Yeah, for 2 months, there was no fire lit in the house. And even Aisha, she would say that many a time would go by in which the Prophet ﷺ hasn't eaten to his full. He's eaten, but he's not bloated. He's eaten, but he hasn't had enough. And that's not to show, to say that they were poor, because they weren't poor. What was it show? It shows us the simplicity of their lives. And it shows us that they had, their primary concern was always akhirah. And if they ever had additional food or additional money, what would they do with it? Go look for somebody who needs it. So that was there. Whereas, you know, today, alhamdulillah, Allah's blessed us. We've got enough food in our fridge and our freezer to last us 6 months minimum. Right? If, 20 people turned up, we have enough meat in the fridge and freezer to feed all of them. Alhamdulillah. Allah bless you all. But to just show you the difference between that mindset and lifestyle compared to us. So she mentions that every once in 2-3 days that we would gather, the women would gather and we would go and we would relieve ourselves. So upon them moving, Mistah, by the way, she was, and it's important to make an Mistah, she was the granddaughter of Abdul Muttalib. Okay, she was the granddaughter of Abdul Muttalib. What does that mean? That she was the cousin of the Prophet. Yeah, so this is important to understand the relationship. That she was the cousin of the Prophet, and her mother, okay, Mistah, her mother was the aunt of Abu Bakr. So she was connected to the Prophet, and she was also connected to Abu Bakr. And the person who we're talking about here, Aisha radiallahu anha, she's the wife of the Prophet and she's the daughter of Abu Bakr. So you can see that there is connection here. Now, traditionally, in our cultures back home, whether it's Arab culture or whether it's a subcontinent culture, you'll find that relatives got married. So sometimes with a person, you'd have more than one relationship. Right now, it's different. But normally you'll find your chacha, and then you got another connection with him from another direction. So Mistah was related to the Prophet, was the cousin, and also she was the mother of the aunt of Abu Bakr. So there was a relationship from both sides. Likewise, her mother, she was a direct relative of Abu Bakr, and she had married Mistah. She had actually married another one of her cousins. So Mistah, being a relative of the Prophet and also being related of Abu Bakr, she married one of her cousins, which means her husband was also related to the Prophet and Abu Bakr as well. Okay, so this is important to note because we will come to see why that's connected. So her husband was related as well from both sides as well as she was. So each was from the different children of Abdul Muttalib. So as they were walking, we find Aisha, she was walking with Mistah. Mistah, she was walking, she tripped over on something. As she tripped over on something, she said through her words, she cursed Mistah. Mistah was her son. May the curse of Allah be upon him. She cursed her son. When she said this curse, may Mistah be perished, Aisha, her response was shocking. She said to her that, why did you say such a thing? Why would you curse your own son? Here we find something beautiful again, the hikmah and the wisdom of the mother of the believers, that this is a son, that the dua of the parent is always accepted. It's important to note that the dua of the parent is accepted, and she just made dua against her own son. So Aisha, being someone who doesn't know what's going on and what people are saying, she hears that response, and she says, why did you say such a thing about Mistah? And the other thing about Mistah was as well, that he was from the Ashab Badr. He's from those who fought in Badr. And we know there are a number of hadiths that talk about the virtues of the people of Badr. In terms of the Sahaba's high ranking, after Al-Ashar al-Mubashara bil-Jannah, the next best are the Ashab Badr. So the people of Badr, we have to treat them extremely high, not just high with the Sahaba, but extremely high. So he was from amongst the people of Badr. So when Mistah said this, Aisha responded, and she said, why do you say such a thing, and why do you say this about somebody who witnessed the Battle of Badr? A lesson to note here as well, and as we said with this story, I don't want to just narrate you the story, I want to take out as many benefits as we can. So in that we find that Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, that when something was said about another fellow Muslim, what was her initial response? She came to his defense. Yeah, she came to his defense, and she spoke about his positive qualities. Which also shows us that if another Muslims, somebody's talking about them or speaking about them negatively, our initial response should be one of defense, not one of attack or suspicion. We should try to defend the honor of the Muslims. So Aisha, she asked her mother, why is that you're saying this about your own son? Mistah responds to her and says, do you not know? Do you not know what is happening? And Aisha, she didn't understand what was being said or what she was referring to. And then Mistah narrated onto Aisha what exactly is being said. And that was when the shock hit Aisha, that she realized what people are saying and what is going on, and things started to make a little bit more sense of what is going on around her. So you can imagine that this young 14, 15-year-old, whose first husband is the Prophet ﷺ, who she honors and loves very deeply, is now the subject, or she is the topic of the talk of the town. And it's not just that it's a small discussion, but the worst accusation you can think of is being said. So you can imagine her response. You can imagine how she was feeling. And this is why they say that the story of the Ifk is very personal, very emotional, not just to the Prophet ﷺ, but also primarily to Aisha, and also those, Abu Bakr and the mother of Aisha as well. Okay. So when she returns back home and the Prophet ﷺ enters into the home, she asks permission from the Prophet ﷺ, can I go and see my parents? I would like to spend a few days at my parents. In which she takes permission, and the Prophet ﷺ grants her that permission. Now bear in mind here, again, this is the wisdom and the hikmah and the leadership of the mother of the believers. That if a woman at that age has been accused of such a horrific crime, what would be her reaction when she sees her husband? Today, what would a woman do? Yeah, there'll be an issue straight away. There'll be something, there'll be a reaction of whatever sort it is. But Aisha, she kept composed. As a young girl, she kept composed, and she didn't say anything to the Prophet ﷺ. And at this time, the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't know that she had found out. She knows what's happening. So she sought permission from the Prophet ﷺ to go to her parents' house. Which shows us again, when situations arise, being reactionary or responding is not the right response. She was cool, and she kept her calm, and she asked to go to her parents' house, and which she did. Furthermore, when news or accusations are made, what's one of the first things the person should do? Yeah, to verify the information, because now Mistah has told her something, but what's the reality of that? What's the truth behind that situation? So before she confronts her husband, she actually goes to verify the information. And who is best to verify the information with? Her mother and father. So this shows us great hikmah in Aisha, that she didn't turn to her friends. As many times maybe wives get into problems with their husbands, the first thing to do is they turn to their friends. And sometimes the friends are not the best of advisors. They'll say something to you and they'll mess your relationship up. But your parents, when it comes, generally speaking, most parents, when it comes to your marital relationship, they would always think of that which is good for you. They will not say something to break up your marriage, especially your daughter. So she wanted to verify the information, and where to verify it from? From the parents. And the other thing very beautiful to understand as well from this story is that Aisha, even after hearing what had happened, she sought her husband's permission to go to her parents' house. She didn't say, I'm going, packed her bags and left and wrote a note on the table. She said she waited for him to come, and when she came, she asked permission, and the person gave her the permission and said, "Go visit your parents." This shows, well, like, there's great hikmah and wisdom in all of this, and it shows the skills and the leadership of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. So the Prophet ﷺ, he gave her permission, and upon that, Aisha, she returned and she went to see her parents. So the importance of verifying information that comes to you, and also another point to benefit from that as well, is that not just seeking advice or seeking consultation from your parents, but also she went to go see those who are older than her mother and her father. Because when you seek advice, number one, seeking advice is very important, but seeking advice from somebody who's got a life experience is different to somebody who doesn't have a life experience. So sometimes you may find that a brother or a sister is having marriage problems, and they go get advice from a sister who's never been married. Now, she could be the best sister in the world, but if you've never experienced it, how can you actually give advice? Or a brother that's never been married and is giving marital advice, how can you really take that seriously, because you haven't had that experience? So she went to seek advice from those who are older than her, and those who are parents who will have her best interest at mind. That's why they say that knowledge is very, very important, but there's nothing that can be experienced. Yeah? So if a person maybe hasn't read many books, but if they've got life experience raising children or marriage and so on and so forth, their experience carries much more weight than maybe what people may read. Okay. All right. The other thing to make note is that the house of Abu Bakr was on the outskirts of Medina. It wasn't central inside of Medina, so there was a fair travel from the house of the Prophet ﷺ to the house of Abu Bakr and Umar. So the house, the father of Aisha's name was Abu Bakr. What was the mother's name? Anybody know? Roman. Yeah, that was the Roman. So the mother of Aisha's name was Roman. Okay. So when she got home and she confronts her mother and she asks her mother, I'm giving you a summary of the hadith without adding into myself. So when she got home and she spoke to her mother, so her mother told her to calm down. Her mother said to her, calm down and take it easy. And the mother actually, she says to Aisha that this is something which is normal. And the mother of Aisha, she actually, her response to her, she said, this is something normal, and she actually pointed in the direction of the other wives. She said, it is normal that you are the beloved of the Prophet ﷺ, you are the youngest of the Prophet ﷺ, you are different to all the other wives, and it is possible that this is jealousy of the other wives and they have said something about you. So this is what she said. That was her natural reaction to the incident, in which she said that it is normal. So she told Aisha to take it easy, it's just something that maybe some of the other wives have spread. So she blamed the other wives, not knowing the full extent of the plans of the munafiqeen, of the hypocrites. Okay, and that's also knowing that Aisha was the favorite of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. Okay. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala, she narrates that after her discussion with her mother, then that very night she went back and she laid in her bed and she cried the whole night. She said she cried the whole night and she didn't get any sleep on that day, and she was so difficult for her to absorb that the whole city, all of the people are talking about what she has done. And likewise, we also noticed that the Prophet ﷺ and his kind nature, that he showed great hikmah as well, that he never confronted Aisha, he never said anything about her, or he never said anything to her while she was in a state, while she was unwell. But the rumors had spread and the closest of people had started talking. Likewise, the Prophet ﷺ, what did he do? The Prophet ﷺ also, he sought consultation, shura. He wanted to get advice from people around him. So the Prophet ﷺ made a public statement in which he defended the honor of his wife, and he said that I know the history, I know what they're like, this is not from them. But at the same time, we got to remember that the Prophet ﷺ was still a man. So the Prophet ﷺ, what he did do, he summoned two of the most closest people to Ahlul Bayt, to his family. And he wanted shura, just to ask them, what should I do? It's been a month and no revelation has come by. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not sent down any revelation on the situation. The Prophet had to deal with the situation himself. What should I do? So what did the Prophet ﷺ do? He summoned two of the closest people to him. And anybody know who he called?
Ali.
Yeah, very good. No, Ali. And the other one was Usama bin Zayd. So he summoned Ali ibn Abi Talib and he summoned Usama bin Zayd. He called them in and he wanted to do consultation. Another beautiful lesson here is to say, is Ali more knowledgeable than the Prophet ﷺ? Is Usama bin Zayd more knowledgeable than the Prophet? So will you say, why consult them? What's the point? You're the messenger of God. Why do you need to consult people who are less knowledgeable than you? This shows another trait of not just the Prophet, but of leaders that never make decisions by yourself. No matter how wise you are, no matter how influential you are the prime minister, you are the king, you are the most knowledgeable person, always do shura. And always do consultation with the people that are most closest to you. Ask them their opinions, ask people's opinions. And they will always help you because there may be something they see that you don't see. Right? So he did consultation and he brought forward Ali bin Abi Talib and Usama bin Zayd. Okay? So the importance of shura and consultation. Now, question very quickly before we go into looking at what they said. Who was Ali? Ali was the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ. He was one of the early Muslims. And where was he raised? In the house of the Prophet ﷺ. Raised by Khadija, the first wife of the Prophet ﷺ. So they were raised and they're so much so that they would say that it was almost like Ali was like the younger brother. Yeah, that's how close they were. Or some even say like his son. Yeah, that's how tight and how close the Prophet ﷺ and Ali bin Abi Talib they were. And later, what does Ali end up becoming to the Prophet ﷺ? Not yet, but later.
Son-in-law.
Son-in-law. So this is Ali is very close to the Prophet ﷺ. The second person was Usama bin Zayd. And who is Usama bin Zayd? Usama bin Zayd was the son of Zayd. And who was Zayd? The adopted son of the Prophet ﷺ. Not his blood son, but the Prophet ﷺ took him in as a young child and he raised him. Right? And he was the adopted son of the Prophet ﷺ. And of course, the concept of adoption needs to be discussed a little bit more detail, but the rules of adoption came later. That in Islam you can adopt. Actually, but the word adoption is not the right word, because in Islam you can't, if the son is not your biological son or daughter, you can't give them your name. Yeah, you can't call them son because they're not your blood son. You can take them in and you can look after them and raise them. Is highly praised if you do that. Allah will give you a lot of ajr if you do that, but you have to make it clear that that's not your blood son. Yeah, and that has impact because things like marriage, because it's not the same unless obviously he's been breastfed. So his marriage will have an impact who he can and can't marry. And the other thing is also mirath, inheritance. The inheritance goes, it's the right of the blood, that the mirath goes. So the adopted son, you can give them, but not inheritance. So that's why it's important that we understand the concept of adoption as well. But anyway, moving forward, so Zayd was the adopted son of the Prophet ﷺ, and Usama bin Zayd was the son of Zayd. And he was very, very close to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And Zayd also served the Prophet ﷺ. So I don't like to use the word servant or slave because it's not right. But he was, I don't know, what's the right word? In English, it's very difficult to explain that word.
Adoption.
Yeah. Mental. I don't even maid is not the word. He did khidmah of the Prophet. Yeah, how you want to translate that is difficult.
Private service?
Yeah, even that has connotations to it, right? Yeah, but he was the khidmah, he was the helper, a helper of the Prophet ﷺ. I don't want to use the word slave or servant, it's not right.
Carer, maybe.
Carer?
Very close.
English is a weak language. Yeah, you need so many words to explain.
Khidmat God.
That's not English, but still it's a good word. So he did the khidmah of the Prophet ﷺ. So Zayd, he did the khidmah of the Prophet ﷺ his whole life, and he also married another one who was doing khidmah of the Prophet ﷺ as well. And they had the son Usama bin Zayd, and they were raised in the house of the Prophet ﷺ, so they were very, very close. Now, so what did they say? So the Prophet ﷺ, he brought Usama close, and he asked him, he said, yeah, Usama, this is the situation. People are talking about Aisha. What is it that you have to say? Usama, without any hesitation, so notice that he's spent a lot of time in the household of the Prophet ﷺ. He knows his wives, he knows so and so forth. He was a child, he understands. He responded back and said, Ya Rasulullah, we know nothing but good of your wives. We know nothing but good of them. And we have nothing to say, they are the best of women. And he said, keep them and fear not the blame of the blamers. Don't listen to what people are saying. They are the best of women and we know no fault. We can't hear of any fault of Prophet ﷺ. So stay strong. Then he summons Ali radiallahu ta'ala and he asks Ali his opinion. Ali, he has slightly different response, in which he says that, Ya Rasulullah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made you the Prophet of God, and he has not restricted you in any matter. He has not restricted you in any matter and there are plenty more women if you choose to marry that you can marry. This was the advice that Ali ibn Abi Talib gave. At the same time, having said that, Ali also confirmed the innocence and the purity of the character of Aisha. It's important to note because others will exaggerate on this point. But the Surah that Ali radiallahu anhu, he said, he praised her and he said to her that she is innocent. But at the same time, Ya Rasulullah, it's been a month, you're going through some hardship, that there are women that if you choose to marry, you can also marry as well. So Ali, he gave a slightly different response. And in those words, you can see that when you take advice, different people will give you different advice. You know? Even though both of them, nobody would deny that any of them had any alternative motives in their advice, but that's what the advice that they gave. Okay. So the Prophet ﷺ, what is he doing? He knows that his wife is innocent, yet he speaks to the most closest people to him. Why does he do that? To confirm the situation. Prophet ﷺ knows, now he's spoken to the two most closest people, they also confirm the matter that the mothers of the believers, the wives are pure and the innocent. Now the matter is settled in the heart of the Prophet ﷺ, that he's done his consultation and he knows. Ali radiallahu ta'ala, he doesn't just stop there. He actually goes a little further. And he says, Ya Rasulullah, why don't you bring in Barira? Barira was one of the maids of Aisha. She was one of those that used to work with Aisha doing the household duties. He said, why don't you bring her and ask her any further questions you have, because she's a lot closer to Aisha than any of us could be. So the Prophet ﷺ, he summons Barira, this maid, and he asks some questions. Now you can imagine as well that Barira being a maid, simple maid, and she's now been told to stand in front of the Prophet ﷺ and give testimony about Aisha. So this is a very tense or scary moment. So he asks her about her. He says, oh Barira, is there anything about Aisha that you would like to tell me? Has there been any guests or people that have come? Did she go out, or he asks her certain questions. Is there anything unusual that you may have seen with her? Barira, she responds, and her response, she says, Wallahi, I have never seen anything from her that will ever bring any doubt in my head. She said, I know her, and there is nothing in her at all that would bring about any suspicion in any way. She said, there is only one thing that I can make mention. So the Prophet asked her, what is that one thing? She says that sometimes when you give Aisha, don't forget her age, yeah, is when you give her a task to do, a chore to do, sometimes she'd fall asleep. So if she was told to cook or clean or make bread or something like that, in the middle of the task, she'd end up falling asleep. She said, that's the only thing I can think about. That's not a positive thing that I can say, right? Look at the innocence, the bara'ah of what they're saying. This is the worst thing that she could think of, that when I give her a task to do, she sometimes falls asleep. And then she said, oh yeah, and Ya Rasulullah, one time she made the bread. Yeah, she did the najeen, or as you will say, atta gutna. Okay, so she did the atta to make the bread, and she made the bread, and she said she didn't pay attention, and a goat came and ate the bread. Those are the two things that Barira could think about. There was nothing else that could be said in response to her character. SubhanAllah. So this is what was said. The only thing they could think of were those two issues. Aisha was an innocent woman. Her crime was that she simply fell asleep while she was doing some household work. And this is coming at the mouth of Barira, who defends the honor of Aisha. Okay. Now the Prophet ﷺ, having spoken to Usama, having spoken to Ali, and also having spoken to Barira, he was 100% sure of his situation, of his stance. And yet, as I said, there was no wahi that had come down. Jibreel had not come down to tell the Prophet ﷺ. And the question here is, does the Prophet have authority over when Jibreel comes and doesn't come? No. Here's a really interesting point, yeah, for everyone to really know. And this is, of course, we don't accept it, but if the Prophet ﷺ wasn't the Prophet of God, if he was a liar, as some people say, A'udhu Billah, yeah, if he was lying, would he have waited a month? What would he have done? Any man in that situation, now it's a bit different. Now men don't have much ghira, yeah, but those time, men, when it comes to in those traditional societies, somebody speaks about your wife, it's a death warrant. You're going to get beat, so you don't speak about people's women. And this has been a month. Everybody's talking. If he wasn't the Prophet, what would he have done? He would have lied. He would have said, oh, Jibreel came to me and said to me something. He would have done. Why would he wait a month? And why would he let everybody say what they want to say and not respond? This is proof he was the Prophet of God. This is proof that he had all the opportunity to lie, to make up a story, to do anything. If he had said, God forbid, of course he didn't, But if he had said, Jibreel came to me and said to me that Aisha is innocent, would anybody doubt that fact? Nobody would doubt that fact. They would accept it. But he didn't. Everybody kept talking. This is one of the strongest proofs that he is the Prophet of God. The strongest proofs that the Qur'an is from Allah and not from the Prophet. Because any man who's writing the book about himself and trying to get, some say that he wanted power, he wanted to be a warlord, yeah? Why would you in your own book write that your wife was accused of such an action? If there's anything that you could do, you would remove that chapter from the book. That's the first thing you would do. But he didn't. And he waited a month. Which shows us that, subhanAllah, he was and is the Prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Qur'an is the word of Allah. No doubt at all. If there was anything he would remove, it would be these verses, without any doubt. But he had no authority to do that. Likewise, when it comes to revelation coming from the skies, that he had no authority over when Jibreel comes and doesn't come. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he sends Jibreel when Allah wants to send. So Allah, he makes mention in Surah Maryam, worthy making a note of verse number 64, وَمَا نَتَنَزَّلُ إِلَّا بِأَمْرِ رَبِّكَ, that we do not send down Jibreel except بِأَمْرِ رَبِّكَ, with the permission of Allah. لَهُ مَا بَيْنَ أَيْدِينَا وَمَا خَلْفَنَا وَمَا بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ وَمَا كَانَ رَبُّكَ نَسِيًّا. Allah has authority over all things, and Allah does things and he is not forgetful. Meaning the story of the if, even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. Right? And Allah has chosen to delay the wahy. There is hikmah and wisdom in that, and Allah sent down Jibreel later. Still to this time, we don't have any revelation about this issue. So it shows us that the Prophet ﷺ, or what the Prophet could have done, he could have also done what? Not just lie or make up a verse, he could have just divorced her. He could have just, when the rumors were spread, could have just divorced and married somebody else. End of story. It's not my problem anymore. But he didn't. He waited, because he knew that she was innocent, and he was waiting from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for some actions. He didn't jump to any kind of reaction. He was very patient, and he waited with the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. So the Prophet ﷺ now has confirmed all the information. So he gathers all of the major companions, and he climbs up onto the mimbar to give a sermon. He climbs onto the mimbar to give a sermon. The Prophet ﷺ stands and he addresses the people. And he says to the people, "O people, would you stop me from taking action against a person that has harmed me and my family?" Who is he referring to? Abdullah ibn Ubay. Here again, something really beautiful, subhanAllah, the subtlety of the lessons. Abdullah ibn Ubay has been causing the Prophet some problems from day one. When, for example, in the Battle of Uhud, when how many men walked out into Battle of Uhud?
700.
1,000 at first, and then 300 came back because of who? Abdullah ibn Ubay. In the Battle of Uhud, as 1,000 people were going to the battlefield, as they got close to the battlefield, Abdullah ibn Ubay said to his people, "We're all going to die here. This man, he's going to kill us all." Right at the last moment, he took 300 people back. Now, number one, the numbers reduced. And number two, one of the things before battle, the most important thing before battle is the morale of the people. You don't tell somebody just before a football game or a boxing match or something that, "Oh, you know what, you're going to lose." The person's half finished by the time they even get to the match. So he did that. So in the Battle of Uhud, he caused great problems. Well, you know, in the return of Banu Mustalaq, he caused great problems with the Ansar and the Muhajirun. Now he's caused problems, but this time the problem has come into the house of the Prophet. So the Prophet stands up in front of the major companions and he says, "Would you take blame of me if I take action on somebody who has hurt my family?" That's what he says. Now, this is the beautiful thing. He didn't make mention of the name of Abdullah ibn Ubay. Two reasons. Number one, he doesn't want to honor his lips by saying his name. And number two, he's still giving him a chance. He's still giving that chance that you have an opportunity to make tawbah. The second thing, which is also very beautiful, is that the slander or the action that Aisha was accused of, and we all know what it is not mentioned. The act itself is not mentioned in the Quran. Nor did the Prophet ﷺ use the word. He didn't say it. Nor did when the Sahaba or when others, when they told the story, nobody used that word. Because to use that word, even though she's free of that action, but to use that word in the same sentence as the mother of the believers, in and of itself is disrespectful. So the Prophet, when he stood up, he didn't even say that word. He just said, "Would you blame a man that takes action upon a man that has disrespected his family?" And the Sahaba understood. And this is why they say that al-labib yafham bil-ishara. They say that the wise man understands by what's ishara?
Sign.
By signs, signals. You don't need to say 1 and 1 is 2. Sometimes you look at your face, I know something is not right. Your hand is going this way, dad's not happy. Okay, my wife is upset. You don't need to actually hear it. So a wise man understands by signals, and the Prophet, he said what he said, and the people understood it. So the Prophet stood in front of them, and he did not make mention of the names, and he didn't even make mention of the name of his wife. He just simply made mention of that point. Okay. So that also teaches us adab and akhlaq when we're dealing with the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, and especially when talking about the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. It's not a normal conversation. I've said this many times. It's not a normal. There has to be maximum respect when we come to the subject. Okay. Okay. Likewise, we find that in the khutbah, the Prophet ﷺ, not just he said, would you mind me taking action against a man who has harmed my family? The Prophet ﷺ, he also made mention of Sufyan ibn Mu'attal. And the Prophet ﷺ, he stood up and he said, we know nothing but good of Sufyan ibn Mu'attal. Sufyan ibn Mu'attal was the one who was accused of the act. The Prophet ﷺ stood up and actually said about him, he cleared his name and he said, we know nothing of him except for good. So the Prophet ﷺ cleared his family's name, made his position clear, made it clear about the enemy, and also the one accused of the action as well. So the Prophet ﷺ also praised him as well and said, we know nothing but good of him. And what's very interesting as well, if you look into the life of Sufyan ibn Mu'attal, that his description, they describe him as being a very shy man. Throughout his whole life, he was very, very shy. And after this incident especially, Sufyan ibn Mu'attal, he actually never got married. He never got married and he never had children. After this incident took place, he was shy. He never touched a woman in his life. So he died in that way without ever being married. So Sufyan ibn Mu'attal was also, his name was also cleared. The only thing that he ever said to Aisha was La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, and that was when he saw her. Apart from that, there was nothing else to raise any suspicion or doubt. Now, okay. Furthermore, another lesson to draw out of the story so far is that the reputation of Aisha, the reputation of Sufyan ibn Mu'attal was what gave them their defense and their victory. Which also shows us that as people, we should take great care of our reputation. That their past reputation helped them out in the future. Because their past, when it comes to Sufyan ibn Mu'attal, there was clean, there was no suspicion. Likewise, when it comes to the past of the mother of the believers, was clean, there was no suspicion. Which also shows us, especially when it comes to women, but both men and women, they should be very careful about their reputation, because what you do in the past will impact that which is going to happen in the future. Okay. Another lesson that we can draw out of these is when the rumors were spreading, the Prophet ﷺ, he tackled the situation head on, and he gathered the right information, and he cleared the rumors with the right people. Okay. Now, what happens next? Once the companions, the Prophet ﷺ has made the statement on what should be our reaction with Abdullah ibn Ubay, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they have a mixed reaction. Yeah, they have a mixed reaction. And that reaction we will talk about next week. Okay, what should happen? Because the rumors have spread. Some people are this way, some people are that way. How should we deal with Abdullah ibn Ubay? There's difference happening. So the Prophet, he consulted the companions, and the companions are going to respond, and we will see what their response is. And let us not forget that during this process, while Abdullah ibn Ubay was spreading those rumors, and while he was coming back from Banu Mustalaq, he started to cause division amongst the people between Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj. He was reviving the tribal lines again. And during this time as well, he was doing the same thing. So this concept had sparked, it was rising even amongst the companions of Al-Aws and Al-Khazraj of the tribes. So we will come to see the reaction of the Prophet ﷺ, the reaction of the companions next week, what they did with regards to this situation. So for today, I think that is sufficient for that. The story will continue, and we will get deeper as well. Any questions on what we've taken so far? So don't go ahead of the story, stay within the story. Otherwise I'll have to say the whole story. Yeah.
Wondering, when the Prophet consulted, why didn't he go through? I can understand why he didn't consult with why didn't he consult with
Okay. So the question being raised is, when the Prophet ﷺ, he asked for consultation, he asked Ali and Usama, why didn't he consult other companions as well? Good question, and Allah knows best the exact answer to that. But the primary thing is that Umar, he embraced Islam a little later on. Right? Umar's embracing of Islam was a little later on, and Ali was one of the earlier people that embraced Islam. So he had experience in the household of Khadija and that whole upbringing. Likewise, Zayd, or Usama, the son of Zayd, from a very early on young age. So being young, they actually were inside the house of the Prophet ﷺ. Whereas Umar, Aisha was not mahram to him, so he does have interaction, but not to that extent, because he's not inside the house, right? But as they were young and they were brought up, especially prior to the verse of hijab, there was interaction. So they knew the inner dealings of the house of the Prophet ﷺ.
Something related to this only, that when Prophet Muhammad considered Ali and Muhammad, why? So they were young and they were unmarried, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So why he chose somebody who were unmarried?
Okay, yeah. So in this point, what the Prophet ﷺ is seeking by asking Ali and Usama is it's not a marital issue, but he's just asking, have you seen anything from her that is different? So any behavior that could raise suspicion or raise concern, because you've been inside my house, right? So have you seen anything which raises suspicion, concern? And they both affirmed. They said there's nothing that we've seen that raises doubt.
It was a peak time for Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Salul to hit back. When he got the opportunity to hit back, isn't it when he was politically was on his last legs, he struck the final blow to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Didn't he struck the final blow to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on this opportunity?
From what I understand, Abdullah ibn Ubay, he took all opportunities to get at the Prophet ﷺ, right? He took all opportunities to get at the Prophet ﷺ, directly or indirectly. Directly, as we've seen, and this was probably his most boldest attack on the Prophet ﷺ. But at the same time, we'll also come to see, when we look at the Jewish tribes of Medina, Banu Qurayza, Banu Qaynuqa, and Banu Nadir, that when we look at these tribes, the Jewish tribes, who was supporting them in the background? Abdullah ibn Ubay. He was the one who was supporting them. When Banu Nadir were caught trying to kill the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ told them they're going to be expelled, they were going to leave. But who told them to stay? Abdullah ibn Ubay. He said, stay in your forts, don't leave. Me and my men are going to come, we will support you, and we collectively will kill the Prophet ﷺ. We will fight and we will kill them. Banu Nadir in their forts were waiting for Abdullah ibn Ubay. They waited for a little while. There was no food going in, there was no water going in, because there was a siege. Nothing, they were blocked from the Banu Nadir. The Prophet ﷺ said, take your stuff and go, just leave. But they said, no, we're going to fight. Because they were having hope that the munafiqeen are going to come and help them. They were waiting and waiting and waiting, and what happened? Nobody came. Abdullah ibn Ubay ran away. Couldn't be seen anywhere. That's the trait of a hypocrite. So then they realized, and they threw the white flag, and they said, we would like to leave. And the Prophet ﷺ did not harm a single one of them. And the Prophet ﷺ said to Banu Nadir, take wherever you can and leave. How is that? That is the most merciful Prophet. They committed treason. What is the punishment of treason in this country, for example? What's the punishment of treason? Anywhere in the world. It's death. Any country you commit treason is death. They tried to kill the Prophet ﷺ. They tried to commit treason. And the Prophet ﷺ would be in his right to kill them, but he didn't do that. He said, look, you guys are trouble. I can't have you here. Take your stuff and leave. And Banu Nadir were very wealthy. And they filled up their donkeys and horses with what they had, all kinds of gold. It said so much that these people, they loved wealth so much that they said that even the doors of their houses, they put on top of the donkeys. They had so much love for wealth. Again, if the Prophet was a tyrant, what would he have done? He would have taken their gold. He didn't touch their women. He didn't touch their children. He didn't touch their wealth. He said, take whatever you can and just leave. He said, the only thing you can't take with you is what? Weapons. He said, you can't take your weapons. Why? If they take their weapons, they'll come back and attack. Common sense. So the Prophet said, don't take your weapons. Other than that, take what you want. Banu Nadir, and you can read the seerah. Banu Nadir took every single thing that they could. And when they left as well, what did they do when they left? They destroyed their houses as well. They used to have trees and gardens and fruits. They destroyed their orchards, they destroyed their houses, and they took everything. If the Prophet ﷺ was not the Prophet of God and he wasn't merciful, what would he do with these people? Tell me. You don't need to answer that question. What would he do? But he was rahmatil lil alamin, he was a mercy to mankind. And not just to Banu Nadir, but also to the other tribes as well. Not just with them, but also with Abdullah bin Ubay as well, with the hypocrites. If he was any other leader, they would have pieces to destroy them. So point being is that the hypocrites took every opportunity to strike at the Prophet ﷺ, and this continued right till the end. The hypocrites were present. Some may ask the question, why didn't the Prophet ﷺ just kill all the hypocrites? What's the answer to that?
More will pop up.
More may pop up. This is where you understand whether this is a real leader.
What was the word?
Why didn't the Prophet ﷺ kill all the munafiqeen? Because he knew them. Why he didn't just get rid of them?
Was it in English? I couldn't get the word in English.
He said maybe more people will pop up. Yeah, more hypocrites. But that's not the full answer.
As far as other people are concerned, they are still Muslims, right? So if he kills them, the other will be like, if he's killing Muslims.
The Prophet ﷺ, he said, if I kill the munafiqeen, the Persians and the Romans will say Muhammad's gone mad. He's killing his own people. They don't know the difference. He's gone mad. So he said, in order for us to maintain that reputation, we'll deal with them internally. Yeah.
The Americans and Britain will say that.
So that's one of the hikmah, one of the wisdoms that you'll find also in the Quran, when Allah speaks about jihad against the kuffar, that is qital, and when Allah talks about jihad against the munafiqeen, that it is mostly dealing with the tongue, dealing with them in a different way because of the consequence. Any other questions? Yeah.
In a woman's very difficult time, when someone makes remarks or advises you, you can marry with different women, and it reaches to the affectee. Do you think the affectee will forgive that person?
So every person has their own advice. If you have a situation and you got 4 or 5 brothers and sisters and you ask them for advice, the advice may not be the same from every person. The advice will differ. And the advice of Ali radiallahu ta'ala was not an advice that was harmful or spiteful or distasteful. It was a genuine advice. That, O Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you are the Prophet of God and you can marry whoever you like. You're going through hardship at the moment. By the way, he didn't say to him, divorce her. And lies. Yeah, make sure when people quote such things, they have to, on these topics, they have to be accurate. He never said that. He said she is innocent. He said, I know nothing of her but good. And he said nothing about her in his whole life till last month, apart from praise for her. But he just simply said, Ya Rasulullah, you're going through hardship. It's been a month. If you need another wife, you can marry another woman. That's what he said. Now, of course, the listener to that may not like that advice, but that's his advice. That's his advice.
He was quite young. He said that he was almost like his son.
It's very possible, very possible. At the end of the day, what you got to remember is that the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, those who are most closest to him and further, they're human beings. And each person is giving their own advice. You may see, for example, I'm just saying, you may see your brother having marital problems, yeah? And you may say to him, brother, look, I know you're going through issues. She's great, but you've got some issues there, and your life is pretty stressed. Why don't you marry a second wife? Some may say, give you that advice. The other one may say to you, why don't you divorce her? The other one say, brother, be patient. But as long as the person giving the advice is sincere, the advice is valid. They're human beings, they're giving the advice. It's not something that Ali's advice was not something which was detrimental. He was not trying to cause fitna or fasad. He was not showing his hatred or animosity to anybody. A'udhu billah. People who say that they are liars. That's not what he was saying. He was giving his advice. That was his advice. And we respect that. And some people may like that advice, some people may not like that advice. That's the nature of the advice. And if anybody was to say that based upon this advice, future events took place, they have to show proof of that. Otherwise, it is getting. We have to be very clear from that. Otherwise, if there's no proof, stay quiet. You have no authority to talk. Okay. Another question? Yep.
Last one. Yes, one last.
No, go ahead. It's okay.
Go ahead.
Hazrat Ruman's advice that it is natural, hasad, among wives. Regarding this advice, isn't it for us to marry, not to marry unnecessarily with women?
I don't get the question.
So the question is that when Aisha went back to her mother, radiallahu anha, and she asked Ruman, who is her mother, what's happening, her natural reaction was, again, look, the Sahaba and the Sahabiyat are human beings. Okay, they are the best human beings, there's no doubt. They make mistakes. They think like the way we think, but they knew their boundaries. They understood things. We're not trying to make them into angels. We're not saying that, and nobody would say that. But what we're saying is they're human beings, but they were the best of human beings, yeah? And that's not my word, that's Allah saying that in the Qur'an, many places, right? So Allah is saying that, but they're still human beings. So the mother here, when she sees that her daughter has been criticized, her natural reaction is, who would talk bad about somebody's wife? A co-wife, right? And we've seen that in the Qur'an as well, in other places, where the co-wives showed extreme jealousy amongst each other. There's other places where they did. The wife of the Prophet ﷺ, they were jealous of one another. And there were events where they had back and forth because they were jealous. This is nothing but praise for the wives of the Prophet because they were human beings. This is normal and natural. We're not saying that they were beyond human, and women get jealous. That's normal. And if the wives of the Prophet ﷺ get jealous, then wives of other people also get jealous. This is normal. But they knew their limitations and they knew where to stop. And that's what we find. And even we find in front of the Prophet ﷺ, sometimes we find Aisha and Hafsa getting jealous and food being thrown in front of the Prophet ﷺ. What did the Prophet ﷺ do? He said, "Gharat ummukum," and he smiled and laughed. He said, look, your mother got jealous again. By the way, that's also from a man's perspective is a sign of pride, that his wife is jealous over him. He's got multiple wives, and his wives, that when the wife shows ghira and love for her husband, that she gets jealous, there's also, the husband feels, she loves me. And this is also praise. So this is normal for the wives. And the response of Ruman, what she said about his wife, was a normal response. It wasn't the correct response because they were innocent, but it was her initial reaction. That's what the mother-in-law said. Yeah. Any other questions?
But there was no jealousy shown in this incident by the
co-wives.
other man.
Yeah. We don't see, through the hadith, we don't see anything from Aisha. They're not criticizing or saying anything about the co-wives. We don't see that. We don't see any of that happening. Yeah.
When this surah began, you advised us that we need to be most respectful towards Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we do that, alhamdulillah. But like in Surah Al-Baqarah, in the second last words, we also kind of daily restate that we make no distinction among the messengers of Allah. So, being among the ummah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is that our duty to love and respect him more than anybody else, or do we also abide by that line, or does it contradict in any way?
Yeah, it's a good question. So in the Quran, there are verses in the end of Surah Al-Baqarah and other places in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the Anbiya, right? That لَا نُفَرِّقُ بَيْنَهُمْ, that we don't make distinction between them. In other places as well, the understanding of these ayat, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying here is that we do not behave as the Jews and Christians did with the prophets, which means they rejected some of them. We're not allowed to reject any of them. Rejecting any prophet is kufr. But at the same time, what we do understand is that even the prophets, there is roles amongst them. Some are superior over the others, and there's no problem in that. For amongst all of the prophets, the best of them are the 5, ulul azm min ar-rusul. And from those 5, who is the best? Muhammad. Does that mean we love one more than the other? No, we love and respect all of them. But the Prophet is the leader. Likewise, when it comes to the Sahaba and also the Sahabiyat, is the same thing. Even amongst them, there are those that are at the top and there are those that are lower down. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكُلًّا وَعَدَ اللَّهَ الْحُسْنَى. What does kull mean?
All of them.
Allah says, and all of them, وَعَدَ اللَّهِ, Allah has promised them al-husna. What is al-husna? The best, which is what? What's the tafsir of al-husna? Al-Jannah. Allah says, وَكُلًّا وَعَدَ اللَّهَ الْحُسْنَى. Allah says, Allah has made a promise that all of them, Allah promises them Jannah. And no one goes to Jannah unless they are pure. In all aspects. The human beings, they make mistakes, I'm not denying that, but they are pure. Their intentions were to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the best of their abilities, and there may have been mistakes along the line. There's human nature, people do that. So we do have that. Likewise, when it comes to the women, for example, from amongst the women, who is the best of women? Huh? Maryam. Yeah, she is the leader. And likewise, from amongst the other women, the Prophet spoke about Khadija. He spoke about Aisha. The Prophet, when speaking about the Fatima, about being from the leaders of the women of Jannah. Likewise, when it comes to Aisha, then the Prophet, he said to her that, he said, Aisha, in comparison to all of my wives, she is like, he said, a tharid. Yeah, which is a type of, today's language is a type of salan, right? It was the favorite dish of the Prophet. He said, out of all of the food, this dish is my favorite. And the Prophet, out of all of the women, Aisha is my favorite. Those are the words of the Prophet. So we have to show that level of respect. Okay, mashallah, I'm conscious of time. Let's just read out some of the comments online. Brother Zubayr, he sends Islam to everybody. Sister Hira Khan as well, alaikum salam. And Sophia Akram as well, alaikum salam to Allah barakatuh. On YouTube, Muhammad Atif Suraya, mashallah. Assalamu alaikum to everybody in class. Feroza sends Islam to everybody in class. TC, is the sound okay? Okay, started working, yeah. Sumul Ghulzar, alaikum salam to Allah. Brother Tariq, alaikum salam. Farhana says salam. Auntie Esma, she says assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to everybody in the class, and is beneficial knowledge and keep us all steadfast. Brother Amir sends his salam. Auntie Esma, she says every day in our lives, Ameen thumma Ameen. Sister Firoz says Ameen. First says this is a great lesson for husbands and wives. Before judging each other, they should be aware of whispers and rumors. Very good. Brother Yama as well, salam to everybody in the class. Brother Amir says, I assume that it is okay to take advice from non-Muslims, particularly if the topic being discussed is related to personal matters. Yeah, there is no harm in, Brother Ahmed is asking, can we take advice from non-Muslims? There is no harm in taking advice from anybody who's qualified. Okay, so if you have a specific advice and it's a non-Muslim who's qualified in that, then there's no harm in taking advice from that person. Okay, for example, you're choosing between two cars, which one should I buy? You don't need to go to Maulana and ask him about the car. Ask the people who know about cars. Okay, but if it's something dealing with religious matters, go to people who fear Allah. So, for example, when it comes to marital issues, I've had this experience where somebody has gone to a non-Muslim counselor, and when the sister explained her story, the non-Muslim counselor said, "How could you live with such a man? Divorce him." That was the kind of conclusion, which is not what the sister was going to look for. So those times you have to go to people who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and understand the Sharia, and they'll give you a more accurate response. So certain things you go to Muslims. In general, if you want, for example, financial advice, yeah, should I invest here, should I invest there? Don't go to Maulana. If you want to know financial advice, go to a financial investor and he will tell you what to do. Okay, so yes, you can take advice from those who are most qualified. Before I conclude, I want to just make mention, we have a guest in the room. Okay, I didn't tell the brother, but I want to, if you don't mind, is that okay? Okay, so we have a guest in the room, Brother Bav. Okay, mashallah, very briefly, I'm going to mention his story, and inshallah, he will mention his full story. I know we're out of time, but it's worth listening to. Okay, so Brother Bav, it's first time he's come to this class. I've known him for years, and I've actually known him. It's a very emotional story, so I have to try to keep a straight face with his story. I don't want him to say the full story, but I'm going to give you just a snippet, and then, inshallah, maybe one day we can get the whole story, get him to stand in front of the class and give his whole story. Inshallah. But Brother Bab, I've known him for years, and we used to train together. We used to do martial arts, MMA together at the gym. That's where I met him. And after a few sessions of getting to know him, he actually mentioned to me that he took his Shahada. So he was Sikh, and he took his Shahada. He took a shahada, but then he came across some stuff on the website and internet and stuff which caused doubt. So he kind of drifted away, right? And he, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he wasn't practicing Islam, like, and he had doubts about it, so he moved away from it. This Ramadan going, so that was years that's happened, and we've kind of been semi in touch online and stuff. And he was been trying to reach out to me before Ramadan as well, but astaghfirullah, couldn't quite respond. But in Ramadan, mashallah, he said there was something in him, okay, that was, something in him that was driving him to rethink what he's doing in life. And then in the last 10 days of Ramadan, Bab took his shahada again. Okay, he took his shahada again, and now alhamdulillah, he's on deen, and mashallah, he's going to durus, and he's learning Qur'an, and he's joining us in the circles as well. And his family, originally they were, like he said, they were Sikh. So he had a bit of an issue initially with his family with that, but now I'm not sure how it is. So brother, how is it now?
It's getting better.
Yeah?
Hopefully, alhamdulillah. Tell you guys the full story soon.
Inshallah. Okay, so Brother Babas here, so I want everyone to just recognize his story, and inshallah you can speak to him and he will tell his full story, because there's lots of ups and downs in that. But mashallah, he come from a Sikh background, and now he's embraced Islam. So give him a nice warm hug, inshallah. Allahumma barik.
Bit slow. Takbir.
Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. All right, alhamdulillah. Let's stop there, and we'll pray, inshallah. Brothers at the back, sisters here. And inshallah soon we'll organize it back to give his full story, inshallah.
One day.
One day.